Hello, friends, Romans, countrymen, country people, country persons, country women, everybody. I wanted to. How are you all doing? I hope you're all doing okay. It is a very eclipsey time, is it not? It feels like we're in some sort of permanent full moon, which of course we're not, but eclipses, as I mentioned in my last video, I hope outside of the really stressful events that are unfolding everywhere, news of whatever's going on here in the United States with the speaker situation and with some of the trials that are coming up, etc., are enough to make us all think and reflect. But then when you factor in things that are playing out in other parts of the world, it makes for a very heavy time indeed. On a personal front, as I mentioned, if we look, we've got about a month of what would be called eclipse season, right? We had the new moon solar eclipse in Libra on October 14th. So let's say about October 7th to November 4th or 5th is what we would call eclipse season. And of course, the next eclipse that we're coming up to is the October 28th full moon eclipse in Taurus. The last of the Taurus-Scorpio eclipses that have been with us since, that have really made their presence felt since about September, October 2021. And, there's something about full moons, eclipses too, because they've been eventful since then, but there's something about full moons in Taurus and the politics of the United States. Elections, presidential elections, at least in the last couple of them, have fallen close to, or the full moon, the timing of it has worked out. The timing would work out, but it doesn't have to be around a full moon necessarily, but it does end up being a full moon in Taurus at around the time of the elections. At least that's how I associate it. I could be wrong, but I don't think I'm too far wrong on that. But irrespective, more on the eclipse later. I just hope that we're all paying attention to what is coming up for all of us personally. Remember, just in terms of things that could ultimately, as we move towards the end of the year and into March of next year, we could look back to this time frame and say, oh, this is when this got kick-started, or start, nothing really started. Every start has its start somewhere else. But it is eclipse season, and as I like to say, God takes the wheel. And I'm gonna stop talking about the eclipses because I spent enough time talking about the eclipses in the last video. So you can always go back and take a look at that if you're interested in the eclipse. The one thing that I want to mention from the last video, because it is relevant to what we're talking about today, is that the new moon solar eclipse in Libra, I encouraged you to think of it as operating both as a new moon in Libra and as a south node solar eclipse in Libra. So as a new moon in Libra, we would take the annual transits of the Sun, Venus, Mercury, Mars, and the new moon in Libra, and reflect, communicate, manifest, start something in the sign of Libra. Which house is occupied by the sign of Libra in your chart, and what does that house stand for? Every year around this time, right? Because the Sun transits the sign of Libra at around the same year, pretty much, give or take a day or two, every at the same time, during which time we have a new moon. Now, the transits of Mercury and Venus and sometimes Mars will differ every year, but at least Venus and Mercury will follow closely ahead or closely behind, which would not be following, but you know what I mean. So that's one annual Libra season cycle that would happen every year. And so that means that somewhere we are required to do our annual review of the house that is occupied by Libra in our chart. And after the new moon on the 14th, act on something there, create something, manifest on, create something after the new moon. Avail of opportunities, create something. It could be that in the creation of this, particularly through communication or technology or Mercury-related items. We also and contribute to and fall in line with, align with what Chiron is trying to heal in the Aries part of the chart. Okay, but at the same time, it's also a South Node eclipse. So we've got to look at the macro picture that is going to be with us through much of 2025, and also ask the question, and in fact get ready to, and we're already in this process of releasing something in the Libra part of the chart. Now, this could all be one related set of things, but it's likely going to be two separate things that are related to the Libra part of our chart. There's a larger question of what does it mean to lean into the Aries part of the chart. We had the first of the Aries-Libra eclipses, which was a North Node eclipse on April the 19th of this year. So we would look to the week before and after April the 19th and June the 19th of this year for that. And we now have the first solar eclipse in Libra, and it's the only complete eclipse cycle on this axis, where you've got the North Node solar eclipse on October 14th and the South Node solar eclipse in Libra on October the 14th, and a corresponding lunar eclipse in Libra on March the 24th. All the other eclipses, I'm pretty sure, on the Libra Aries axis have a solar eclipse but don't have a corresponding lunar eclipse, or something along those lines. So with that said, something on a much more mundane, everyday, leading our lives in 2023 level requires a certain amount of energy, action, creation as part of an annual cycle in the Libra part of our chart. And then there's this larger question that's been operating since April of this year and continues to 2025. What do you need to release in the Libra part of the chart to lean into, assist with the leaning into the Aries part of the chart, and what opportunities are coming up in the Aries part of the chart that are leading you to release something in the Libra part of the chart? Well, it is the second characteristic of this new moon solar eclipse on the 14th, the eclipse part of it, that is relevant to what we're going to talk about today. Because today, on October the 18th, for me, Pacific time, the Sun and Mercury conjuncted the South Node. And tomorrow, the Sun and Mercury conjunct themselves. So what this means is the Sun and Mercury and the South Node are extremely close together, and today the Sun and then Mercury crossed over the South Node. The South Node moves backwards, and tomorrow the Sun and Mercury will come together, and then Mercury will go ahead of the Sun. The South Node, of course, is the point of release, right? That's what's creating this. The idea with the South Node is that it is a set of behaviors and patterns and attachments that like an overripe fruit or an overdeveloped muscle. I think I prefer the overdeveloped muscle analogy, because it's something we automatically get into doing because it's so strong and so present, but it does not, there's no growth there. And if anything, there can even be loss or damage by staying in that behavior or cycle or pattern. It is something that has been mastered, or at least experienced enough, and so needs to be released. The adventure, the growth, the leaning into is being provided by the North Node in the Aries part of the chart. The new moon, which was an eclipse, was conjunct the South Node. That was the only, so it was a total eclipse, as we know. It was the Ring of Fire eclipse, because the Sun and the Moon and the South Node were really close together. So a few days after the eclipse now, the Sun meets up with the North Node, Mercury meets up with the North Node, and tomorrow the Sun and Mercury meet together. When the Sun and a particular point or a particular planet, and the South Node is not a planet. Sorry, there's a helicopter somewhere up here. Welcome to Los Angeles. The land of the helicopters. When The nodes are calculated points where, standing from the Earth's perspective, they're calculated points. They're not planets, they're not bodies. I'm going to try and keep this concise. So because it's not a planet or a celestial body like the moon or Mercury or Venus, it is a point. When the sun crosses over or conjuncts either a planet like Mercury tomorrow or a point like the South Node, it from the way that I experience the transit, not only in my own chart, but for everybody in the readings that I do, it's as if there's a communication. The sun, as I've mentioned to you before, represents us on our soul level. It is that part of us that is always lit, available, awake, connected to source. In fact, it is our source energy. One of the misunderstandings I find with the sun is that it's given a much more yang quality in astrological interpretation than I experience it as, both for myself and for others. It is much more in the middle of everything that we in our personhood are experiencing and doing and reacting to and responding to through Mercury and the moon primarily, and being in action in the world through Venus and Mars. The sun is that part of us that is constantly just this spotlight, evaluating, aware, lighting up everything where it goes, and no shadows, no crevices, nothing left in the dark. And it is that soul level clarity and knowing that when we are in our lunar personalities or our mercurial personalities, or as I said, acting out within the world through our Venusian selves or our Mars selves, we can lose access to. But of course, it's always there. And as we go about our day-to-day business, and particularly when we're doing mundane tasks, or not just, let's just call it awareness. And that part of awareness that really can help drive us in the directions that we need to be driven towards. That part of ourselves that has, what you could call it, our intuitive self, that part of ourselves that is, that bypasses mental, cognitive, trying to make sense of the world. That bypasses mental knowing and just has its own clarity. When the sun conjuncts any point, I find, now when the sun conjuncts a planet like Mercury, we say that Mercury is invisible because it is. We can't see it. The sun is too bright. It eclipses, not quite the right word, but it combusts Mercury. Mercury, when it comes close to the sun, traditionally loses its power. But I find that planets, when they are communicating with the sun or conjunct with the sun, there is a communication taking place. What needs to be done next? What do we know now? Here's what you need to know as you move past this conjunction. So we have the sun and the south node conjuncting. And I would ask you, in the middle of all this reflection, as eclipsey things are likely happening around you, to you, especially we're talking about you in a personal level here, I would ask you that as you look at the past 5 days or so, what signs or awareness have you received that give you clarity when you think about it and reflect on your own, based on what you know and how you're feeling in this kind of solar way of knowing about what it is that needs to be released in the Libra part of your chart? What house does Libra occupy? What does that house stand for? And keep in mind, this could actually be a relationship, a thing, something physical, something tangible. It could be a way of being. It could be your attachment to how it is that other people or something should be. And so by releasing that attachment, you are actually releasing a whole set of patterns and karmic outcomes. And, it's like being stuck in a web that you can just, just release as if you're not attached to, if you can accept people or situations in that part of the chart for who they are and not get so wound up into some sort of karmic web or web of attachment and conflict and wanting things to be a certain way and control, I guess, because it's not something to lean into. It's not something where you're trying to manifest something. Now, it could be that you make a determination, say, fine, I'm going to let the people in this situation and this whatever be what it is, but I'm still going to reflect on whether there's something or someone here that needs to be released, because by letting it be what it is, I release myself from the conflict, but then I still have to ask the larger question, which is this in my highest interest or not? And more often than not, if you're looking at those two things, chances are that there is, when you're releasing your attachment to how you're expecting certain people to be, or how you want a certain situation to be, or what you want the outcome to be, chances are you're also detaching from that situation a certain amount. So you are in the process of releasing it. I would look at the last 5 days or so and just reflect on, because with the sun, I find in general with aspects, it's rarely, almost never on the day the transit is taking place. Especially with the sun, I just say give it 5 days, give it 7 days, give it 5 degrees. And 5 degrees in your chart means 5 days for the sun. So I'm just saying, look back at the last week or look back at the last 5 days and just see and also see who have you been in communication with and what has the communication process been like. Now, it is likely, as I said, that we have all been a little bit beside ourselves. Mercury is close to the sun, Mercury's conjunct the sun, Mercury's combust our own ability to communicate, transact, get things done in mercurial ways, write, text, is hampered. We may find that from a Mercury perspective, from a mercurial aspect in our lives, we have been a little bit paralyzed over the past week or so, and we might continue to be somewhat slow in this manner over the next week or so as well. The Mercury ruled houses in your chart may be affected by this. They might feel slower or less active. The Mercury parts of our chart are always impacted not only by the Mercury retrogrades, of course, because Mercury rules that part of the chart, but also the fact that Mercury conjuncts the sun so often that it just combusts a certain amount. So, those parts of our chart have a kind of, they have ebbs and flows and ebbs and flows and ebbs and flows, similar to the part of our chart that is ruled by the moon. Now, the house in our chart that is ruled by the moon. So there's all of that going on. There's the eclipses. There's the feeling that things are going on behind the veil, in front of the wheel, but our hands are not on the steering wheel. We don't know what is going to manifest, what's not going to, what is going to come through, what is not going to come through. As I say, with eclipses, best to knock on every possible door and every opportunity that is coming your way, because 9 of the doors will likely remain shut, even though you're banging your head against them, and the one door that is meant for you, your hand will barely touch the handle, it'll open, and you will walk right in. We've all had that kind of experience, haven't we, with regard to those things that just have flow and other things that just don't for us, that are not meant for us. So Sun conjuncting South Node and Mercury conjuncting South Node. As you reflect on what it is over the past week or so, past 5 days or so, needs to be released, whether it is something physical or whether it is your attachment to a way of being, either your own or someone else's or a particular situation. Also reflect on what role communication has played in that. Because not only have you had the Sun conjuncting the South Node, you've also had Mercury conjuncting the South Node. And Mercury and the Sun conjunct tomorrow in Libra. But this Mercury-Sun conjunction is part of a larger Mercury cycle that started on September the 6th. Let me make sure I have that right. I think I do. That started on September the 6th in the sign of Virgo. Our Mercury cycle is in the sign of Virgo. So it is possible that whatever this event is, this communication is, somewhere is linked to what the overall communication cycle is in the Virgo part of our chart that we're going to be, that is going to be with us till December 22nd, when the next Mercury cycle starts up in Capricorn. A Mercury cycle occurs and starts when a retrograde Mercury conjuncts the Sun. So Mercury is going direct, the Sun is here, Mercury goes retrograde, and then it conjuncts the Sun, and that starts a Mercury cycle. Mercury continues to go retrograde, then Mercury goes direct. So September 6th, a retrograde Mercury conjuncted the Sun in Virgo. Mercury continued to go retrograde on September 15th, it went direct. On October the 20th, the Sun and Mercury will meet in Libra. Mercury will go ahead. On December 15th, Mercury will go retrograde. On December 22nd, Mercury and the Sun will meet again in Capricorn, starting the next Mercury cycle, okay? When a Mercury cycle occurs, we are asked during the period of that Mercury cycle till December the 22nd to transact, think, communicate, plan, enact in a mercurial way. Communication, transacting, social media technology, skills, letters, agreements, transactions related to that part of the chart where the Mercury cycle started. In this case, Virgo. Where's Virgo in your chart? What house does it occupy? That is where Mercury was retrograde this last September, from August 23rd to September the 15th. And I would not be surprised at all, once you know which house Virgo sits and occupies in your chart, what that house stands for, if you are clear that there's something there that needs to be done that has a communication aspect to it. And it, you know, on October 20th, a phase of it ends. A phase, we're moving from October 20th to December the 15th when Mercury goes retrograde. And I would say try and get this done by about December the 10th. From October the 20th to December the 10th, it is now time to enact whatever needs to be enacted related to this Mercury cycle in Virgo. But because you're having this Mercury-Sun conjunction that is part of this Mercury cycle in Virgo, and yes, it is happening in the sign of Libra, but it is conjunct the South Node, it is possible that whatever it is that needs to be released in the sign of Libra, it could be that the event is somehow linked to the new moon in Virgo, for example, that occurred on September 14th, and what came right after that, what that new moon produced. And remember that that Virgo cycle, all planets in Virgo that have been transiting Virgo have trined Jupiter and Uranus in Taurus, but they've also opposed Saturn and Neptune in Pisces. And that new moon in Virgo opposed Neptune and Pisces. So again, if it is a stressful conversation, might it have something to do with murky behavior, either on your part, but also perhaps on somebody else's part? And it may be linked to whatever these Virgo cycles are, the communication cycle or the new moon in Virgo, but it may be felt on a mundane day-to-day level in the Libra part of your chart. Okay, I'm becoming very specific. This is really how transit analysis works in charts. You look at the start of a cycle, and then you look during the course of that cycle, what aspects will be made during the course of that cycle. And that is how you can accurately get a sense or a prediction on a mundane level. And people who use charts to decipher or predict mundane things. I lost this. Where could this be? When will I get this letter? When will this happen? When will that happen? Use precisely the sense of who is meeting with what and when the cycles start. That is what gives you a sense of it's one thing to say that we have a Mercury cycle in Virgo, but how is that Mercury cycle going to go? And what are the different things that might occur in that Mercury cycle? That has to do with the different aspects that are going to be made, particularly involving Mercury, but as we look at that entire period of cycle. Now, Mercury and the Sun conjuncting the South Node, what has been happening over the past 5 days, 5 days, that has involved communication, transactions, the Mercury part of your chart, the new moon in Virgo, the Virgo part of your chart, forgive me, the new moon in Virgo, whatever it is that from a Mercury cycle in Virgo related to the Virgo part of your chart you're trying to build or implement or communicate or transact or get communications out for, or sales, resumes, interviews, as I said, transactions, short distance travel, maybe commuting, or mercurial things. What relationship does it have to that? But of course it's happening in the Libra part of the chart, and both the Sun and the Mercury, before they conjunct tomorrow, meet up with the South Node. So a sense of, during this eclipse cycle, what it is that needs to be released. And when it comes to the South Node, there's typically our attachment to how we want and expect things to be, and in sort of direct correlation to that, who or what it is that also we need to detach from and release, so that we can move forward into the Aries part of the chart. So what opportunities have been coming up since April the 19th in the Aries part of the chart that are requiring you to do this release in the Libra part of your chart, and what has been happening in the Libra part of your chart related to the Virgo part of your chart that is prompting you to go, you know what? It is time to release various aspects of this. My attachment to how it is that I expect people to be and how to behave. And if it is not a good fit, then to figure out how I can distance myself from this or separate myself from it. The Sun and Mercury conjuncting tomorrow means that phase 2 of a 4-phase Mercury cycle is now ended. Phase 1 was September 6th to September 15th. Taking stock of the fact that the Virgo part of your chart, our chart, needed attention. Thank you, helicopter, for keeping us safe, apparently. The Virgo part of our chart needs attention. September 15th to October 20th, phase a kind of an implementation, ideas, what needs to be done, starting the process of the Virgo communication cycle, October 20th to December 15th. I would say try and get this done by December 10th or so, before Mercury goes retrograde. Implement, execute the Virgo communication cycle. December 15th to 22nd, wrap up. December 22nd, the Mercury, retrograde Mercury and the Sun meet up again in Capricorn and start the new Capricorn cycle. So, to recap, during this time of reflection, and when I say that, I'm going to refer you back to my last video on the new moon solar eclipse in Libra, of what it is that this eclipse period might mean for you related to the Libra and Aries part of your chart, but especially the Libra part of your chart. The question to ponder is, over the last 5 days, do you feel like you have received some sort of an inner knowing at a solar level, a soul level, solar and soul level, intuitively, around what it is that likely needs to be released? And has communication played a part in it? It could be a discussion with someone, it could be a conversation, it could be a written exchange where you just went, It does not have to, again, remember, there's an aspect of us judging or evaluating others because we want them to be a certain way, which they're not. But at the same time, there's also the sense of, well, if they're not, and I let them be who they are, and I start to detach myself from this kind of energy in this situation, then what does that tell me? Does it that is this still worth maintaining, or is there something here that does need to be released? Do things need to be adjusted, either relationship or my attachment to certain things, so that I can move forward into the Aries part of the chart based on any clues about that have started to build since April 19th of this year? So I would reflect on that. I would reflect on and get ready to be in serious action after October the 20th related to the Virgo communication cycle. What needs to be implemented and completed by December 10th? And you don't need to wait till December 10th. You know, your mercurial abilities, communication, transactions, how quickly your thumbs are moving on your phone and the fingers are on the laptop, and you're transacting and selling and communicating and acquiring skills and teaching and social media and, you know, all that kind of stuff will start to gather momentum in about 5 or 6, 7 days, you know, as Mercury clears the sun more and more. But again, if you have the energy and things need to be done, don't wait, carry on. And what is the download between the sun and Mercury as well? What could our solar level, our soul, be communicating to Mercury, our mind, with regard to how we think, what we need to prepare for? What does Mercury do for us? What does the Mercury side of our personality achieve? So much in today's day and age. I mean, the moon really signifies, in traditional astrology, in Jyotish certainly, the moon signifies us. There are Jyotish practitioners that look at transits to the moon the way we in the West look at transits to the sun. A transiting opposition to the moon, a conjunction to the moon, are given a lot of importance, a lot more importance than we do in the West. And I'm inclined to agree. So if the moon really reflects our personality, our emotional, our intuitive responses, our how we feel and interact as we go through the world, how much energy we have. Are we a new moon right now? Are we a full moon right now? Are we a, you know, we are a few days, so our energy is also coming back after the new moon, and we're getting charged to continue to take more and more action. But all that said, the Mercury part of our chart, of course, talks to people and writes and makes things happen through, you know, it takes that personality and it starts to, I mean, communication is everything. The word is everything. You know, reality is grammar. Reality is syntax, right? Words and the relationship that words make to each other define our experience of reality. So somewhere during this challenging eclipse time, the Mercury and the Sun conjunct, and it could very well be that while we've been feeling out of sorts, somewhere there's been this really important process going on, not only with regard to the conjunction to the South Node and what it is that we need to release, but also how can our mental processes and Mercury serve us more effectively? What needs to be taken on a mercurial level to achieve success? I hope you found this useful. It's an important, you know, it's nice. I'm glad that I have the opportunity to share this with you, so that you actually have the opportunity to, it's important, I think, to look at this transit a little bit through the rear view mirror, because I'm only asking you to look at the last 5-6 days or so. In the middle of it, it's better in some ways with certain transits to almost not be aware of them while they're happening and know that they're happening, and then be like, oh, so, because it gives additional context to what has been coming up. So what is it that has been communicated between the South Node and the Sun? What role has Mercury played in it? What needs to be released in the Libra part of the chart? What is the relationship between that and the new moon in Virgo or the Mercury cycle in Virgo? Remember that the connection can be mundane, but the releasing is going to be more macro, related to it's like the new moon in Virgo could have created an event that is going a certain way. And in communicating about that event over the past 5 days, you realized that something in the Libra part of your chart needs to be released to support the Aries part of the chart. The release is much bigger and much more life direction-y. Whatever it is that is being communicated about on the surface is more mundane, but gives you a sense of what is no longer serving you, where is it possible that there's no growth necessarily. And the second question, of course, is where are you at in the Virgo communication cycle? What needs to be done? And also, what needs to be burned off and be born again as Mercury goes through the fire of the sun and burns off, in Sanskrit, or even in Hindi, we have the word sanskar, the sanskar. What burns off accumulated, it's a mind cleanse. It's like going through the fire. It's a fire cleanse. It's a solar cleanse. So what is it that needs to be left behind? How does the Mercury part of us need to be born again through this solar baptism that Mercury goes through? Because the Mercury-Sun conjunction, as Mercury separates from the Sun, Mercury and our minds takes on a life of its own as it is dealing with the real world, and in that process loses connection with our Sun, with our soul. So unless you're doing some sort of practice to keep that alignment and keep that connection going, somewhere dealing with 3D reality and communicating and transacting and making plans and moving forward takes on a momentum of its own. That is why the retrogrades are important. The Mercury retrogrades are important, because they bring things to our attention that in that process we have not been aware of. That is why these Mercury-Sun conjunctions are important, because it brings our mind and our soul in alignment and communication with each other, and realigns these and reintegrates these important aspects of our personality before we can move ahead. This is why the new moons and the full moons are important. Every 28 days, the moon, the lunar part of our chart, goes through this cleanse. It meets up with the sun. The lunar part of our chart diminishes to communicate with the sun at the time of the new moon, and then move forward and build something in the part of the chart where the new moon has occurred over the next 28 days. Taking stock of what these other transits, the Venus transit in that part of the chart, the Mercury transit, and sometimes the Mars transit, have been trying to communicate and learn and execute. Okay, I will leave it at that. Hope this gives you some sort of meaning or framework to assess certain events that may have occurred over the past 5, 6 days, 7 days. And I will be back in touch. Subscribe to my channel if you haven't already, and click the bell icon next to the subscribe. There's a wiggly bell on top. If you click that, you'll know when I do new videos. Feel free to like, comment on the videos if you feel so inspired. It gives the video more circulation. Share, tell your friends about it, etc. If you found the video useful, you can do that. My email address, my contact information is in the subject, in the box below. So if you're interested in a reading, you can always use that email to get in touch with me. I will leave it at that. Thank you.